everybody. I'm Jay Kenner, and this interview is part of my Rights and Wrongs series of interviews and articles about the business and craft of writing. And Darcy is my very first guinea pig guest. So we're going to just see how it goes. And Darcy and, Banana Cat, who is really the subject of the interview. It's really, okay. So I have to tell you about Darcy. So Darcy Burke is the USA Today bestselling author of sexy, emotional, historical, and contemporary romance. She wrote her first book at 11, A Happily Ever After, about a swan addicted to magic and the female swan who loved him. And I have never read this book, and I'm very sad about that. And apparently the illustrations are poor. Do you have the book?
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. Readers, y'all are in for a treat.
I know. It's very exciting. It's funny because I just saw it sitting on the bookshelf the other day and I was like, oh, I should probably whip this out and like read it for people.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so much better than mine. What did I do with mine? I had my book here somewhere here it is. Yes. I found one of my early books. And I was going to read it. But yours is hardback. I'm so impressed. Mine is paperback. Well, you had a better publisher than I did.
This was a school project. So in our elementary school, they used to do in 5th and 6th grade. You did a book in 5th grade and a book in 6th grade when my brother went through like 4 years before me. And his books are really awesome. There was one with an alien, and I forget what the other one was. I thought his books were great. He should have been a writer too. I'm sad he's not, because he wrote this one science fiction story when he was in high school that just completely blew me away. It was all about
really cool.
The real Adam and Eve, and it was like an apocalypse, and then all that was left was Adam and Eve, and that's where the story. Anyway,
I love it.
Fantastic. I should have you read that. Actually, it's really good.
It's sort of like that weird story I was telling you about that I wanted to do with the aliens in the dark pit that maybe I'll write, and at some point, anyway. So
yeah. So yeah, this was the Magic Swan. Oh, sorry, I just hit Banana in the head. Aww. So there you go.
I love it.
And the reason that I'm going to find an example of the bad illustrations because I'm not a good artist at all, which is funny because my daughter is an art major. Copyright April 1982.
Wow. Okay, so this illustrates to me how different our ages are, because I won't tell you what I was doing in 82.
So here are the swans, and you can see if I drew them like an S, they looked fine. But if they were all swimming in the same direction, but if I had to draw a backwards S, like this one, you can see like the erasing marks. See,
I think you're too critical of your swan attempt. Yeah, I think that's just a reflection in the lake upon which they are swimming.
And here they are going to the movie theater where one of the movies playing is Swan with the Wind. These are the jokes, people. Well, no. Okay, here's a really good one. So here you can see Alfred. Look at poor Alfred. I had to redraw Alfred about 30 times.
Poor Alfred. I just don't know that Alfred is a swan name. I just gotta say.
No, Albert. Not Alfred. Albert. Well, the reason his name is Albert is because I dedicated this to my grandmother who loved swans. And my grandmother was Welsh. And so I used a bunch of Welsh names. I chose Albert. I don't know why I chose Albert, because I don't think it's a particularly Welsh name, but it was my grandpa's name.
So there you go. Okay, so that makes sense.
And her name is Gwyn, and Gwyn is the Welsh name. And then there's a Phyllis, which is also a Welsh name. But it is a romance because they're together and he gets too obsessed with magic, and she and Phyllis cook up a plan to get him to realize that he doesn't need magic to be special. And so they make it so that Gwen is going to go over Ponderosa Falls and he has to rescue her. It's all staged, of course, but yeah.
So you were like into story structure back then. What grade was this? What grade were you in?
6th grade. I was 12.
Awesome. I'm very impressed. So mine does not have a plot or a character arc, but I was 6. So
there you go.
There you go. I learned. Okay.
Well, what I didn't realize is, so that was in elementary school. And then I reconnected with one of my best friends from middle school a couple years ago on Facebook. And she's like, oh, it makes such sense that you're a writer, because I remember you'd sit on the bed and you'd be writing. I don't remember that at all. I was like, oh, sure.
Did I? I thought you were going to say that she remembered Albert.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't go to elementary school with her, so.
Oh well.
No, she remembered me writing. I don't remember. I remember writing in high school, but I don't remember writing in middle school. So.
I remember writing in high school, and I wrote these really bizarre, strangely weird sci-fi type stories. Like, I mean, they were all very strange, but my handwriting was and is terrible. And so I would have my mother type them up. And so I still to this day wonder what she thought of all my very strange stories that I wrote. She just, she was a secretary for the National Guard. So she could type a gazillion miles an hour on a manual typewriter, she was a secretary her whole life. And so she would type them up and give them back to me. And I found a few of them over the years, and I read it and I'm like, what pretentious teenage dreck is this? I'm sure my mother was going, I hope this kid has another career plan, because seriously, this is not gonna cut it.
You're brave. I don't think my mom was a typist too, and she was like a, I don't know, administrative assistant or something when I was in high school. And so I remember going to her office to use the typewriter on the weekends to type stuff up. But I don't think I ever would have asked her to type up because I do remember, one of the books I started writing. God, this was the 80s though. It was very like, she traps him into bed or whatever, and she's
right
in, and then leaves to go with her family to France or something, but then somehow mails back the bloodied sheet to like get him in trouble. What the hell? It's awful.
I never wrote that book.
And no, what's that?
I said I never wrote that book.
Yeah, I wrote that. Well, I never finished it. And the heroine had some ridiculous name I made up, like Capricia or something. I don't know.
I love it.
No.
So when I was writing, so mine, like I said, they were stupid short stories that were kind of weirdly science fiction or little mind fucks, because this is not a censored show. So but that was actually how I knew that I was okay with writing romance, because I wrote my very first manuscript that I finished I did no market research. I was so stupid. So lesson to anyone out there, do your market research as to what you're writing. But I was targeting Harlequin Temptation because I'd read Vicki Lewis Thompson, and I loved her books, but that was it. Vicki Lewis Thompson was my market research. And I decided that Harlequin wanted an underwater archaeologist and a documentary filmmaker, because that just screamed Harlequin Temptation in some other language. But it had, sex scenes in it because it was geared for Harlequin Temptation. And I let my mother read it, and she did not pass out and die or, go like ban me. So I was like, okay, if I can let my mother read this stuff, then I can do this job,
Did your mom read romance?
No, she really didn't. She read mostly literary fiction. She read a lot of like Stephen King too. So that was pretty much her. We had things on our little bookshelf in our hallway, like, I don't know, Ship of Fools and stuff like that. And she read nonfiction, and she read a lot of Stephen King. But honestly, she was a single mom from the time I was 7, who, worked and then came home and dealt with a kid. And I don't think she had a whole lot of time for reading. Television was her drug of choice. So yeah, she big on sitcoms.
Mom was my gateway to romance novels. So, I
did not have a gateway to romance novels. I didn't even know romance novels existed until a couple of years before I started writing them, because a friend of mine turned me on to them. I was thinking I was going to be like a legal thriller writer. John Grisham and Scott Turow were huge when I was practicing law. Yeah. And then a friend turned me on to romance. Julie Garwood. She handed me, I wish I remembered which one it was. Julie Garwood, and I thought I'd write a historical. And we've talked, Darcy and I will tell you how Darcy and I met soon, but I do not have the historical head that Darcy does. And so then my friend was like, Julie, there are contemporary romances too, don't you? I was like, really? Oh my God. And so she handed me A Temptation, and I was totally hooked. So yeah, so that was how that happened. But anyway, but Darcy and I, it was great. It was great. So Darcy and I
said we started, really quick. My mom said we started reading Harlequins, but I don't remember it at all. I just remember reading like Kathleen Wood. I remember reading historicals, Kathleen Woodowis, Rosemary Rogers. But she says that I started by reading like Little Harlequins, and I don't remember them at all.
How old were you?
Probably like 8th or 9th grade. I remember in like 7th, 8th grade, I was reading like Victoria Holt and
Yeah.
all the gothic stuff, and I was digging that. I remember that, but I don't remember reading the Harlequins, but apparently I did. So
I don't remember reading them. I know I read a few romances when I was younger because our library didn't sort by genre. It only sorted by author name. And so I'm sure I pulled a few off. And then there was a few I ran across in later years. And I'm like, I know that story. I remember that story, but it didn't click for me that it was a thing until I was an adult. But
anyway, how we met.
So yes. So Darcy and I met at, and tell me if I get any of this wrong, because I sometimes wonder if I get my timing backwards, but we met at a writer's retreat in Tennessee that was just this weird coincidence that I went to. I went with another friend of mine, Dee Davis, and we had gone, but I was like, come with me to this retreat. And Darcy was like with another friend, Elizabeth Naughton, and she was like, come with me to this retreat. And we met there. But what was really cool, I thought, was before that, I had gone to RWA in Orlando, right? The Disney one, which was before that, right? I'm right. And Dee and I had gone to dinner at the Swan.
No, the Orlando, is this the Orlando one where Elizabeth won the Rita?
I don't remember.
Because if it was after we met, because I was in London when she won. And I remember being in the bathroom when it was the middle of the night in London, like trying to find out if she won, and she was with you guys.
No, because I thought you were there. I could have sworn you were there beforehand.
I have not been to RWA in Florida.
Well, maybe you weren't. But anyway, okay, so I told you I was finding a good thing. But what was so funny to me is that Dee was telling me about this book that she had just glommed like in her hotel room called To Seduce a Scoundrel. And she's like, it's so great. It's so great. And maybe she was telling me this because we'd already met you. I don't remember. But by that time, I thought we were friends. So I read it. And so that was my first Darcy Burke, my Darcy. Oh my God. How do people say that?
It's hard to say.
Darcy Burke book.
I can't do it either.
And it was awesome. And I loved it. So Darcy writes contemporary and historicals, but I have mostly glommed her historicals. And I was trying to remember the title for that one and looking through my Kindle earlier today to remember which one it was. And I realized that I couldn't remember the name because I own every single Darcy Burke book ever published. So yay.
I wish I could say I owned every Jay Kenner and Julie Kenner book, but I think I'd be bankrupt if I did.
Yeah, you guys, that's my shell. That only goes to like just past release me. Yeah, that only goes to like 2013, I guess. No, maybe 14 or 15, but so
yeah.
But
so it was 4 years ago, 2 nights ago.
That is
March
impossible.
Night.
I mean, I just cannot.
And I only know that because pictures are showing up on my phone this week. So otherwise,
I find that just remarkable. It seems like we've known each other since like diapers or something.
Seriously.
Yeah, really. It does. It's like, how is this only 4 years? I mean, you tell me a decade, I might be like, it seems a little short, but okay, I'll believe that. You tell me 4 years and I'm like, you are so lying to me. You're just totally lying. But it's true.
It's true.
It's true.
It's true.
Anyway,
that was a fun retreat. You in like a year.
I know. Well, seen, yes. I mean,
well, okay.
Thank you, Zoom.
With you.
Can you imagine doing this pandemic like in the 80s? On the phone with a long distance charge.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine?
I can't
either.
I can't. I don't know. I was helping, my daughter had to write, she's in a creative writing class this week in college, and she had to write something the other day about a reflection on like back in 2019, what you were doing and, the before times.
Yeah.
Calling it. And then today they had to write something about where they saw themselves in a year and how they think they would have changed. And it's really interesting, especially for young people who, she started college last year. And so she's just now, most of her college career has been spent online, doing this. Mm-hmm. And she struggled for a while because she's like, I can't imagine. She literally couldn't imagine. Yeah. And that kind of struck me because it's been a long year.
It has been a long year.
I wish I had wine. I don't have wine because I'm getting my blood drawn in the morning. So.
The interesting thing about it though, and we've talked about this, but there are a few things that I wouldn't want this to be the permanent situation by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a few things that I've found that I really like Darcy and I and a whole bunch of other authors attended a conference for authors. And And it was supposed to be in real life, but it was virtual. And I got so much out of it because I was able to focus, And so I think that in the future, any conference where you're meant to learn something, you should all go to a hotel. You should all split up and go to your room and watch it on the little TV in the hotel. And then you go down to the bar and drink and discuss it afterwards. This is my idea of like the best conference ever. So that is my.
The only thing with that is then the same thing that happens at real conferences. You're like, excuse me, oh, I don't really need to go to this next one. I'm just going to go to the bar with my friends.
Well, that's true.
You miss it.
That's true. But I was saying that to compensate for the getting out. I actually thought this one was great, but that would give you that would give you a reaction.
I loved being able to pause it and write stuff down and learn at my own speed. And
yes, it was
and
great.
I felt like what I learned, I was more actionable about it. Like I actually did the things.
Yes.
As opposed to just walking away from it feeling overwhelmed. And
I could read my notes, whereas I couldn't before, because I'm scribbling so fast.
And part of it was you could also piecemeal it. So if you didn't want to do a whole day, you had a recording, so you could go back and maybe do one of them the next week.
Yeah.
And not be quite so overwhelmed.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. So
I did too.
Sky, if you're watching, kudos. Loved it. I know.
But I loved the news tonight that they'll have enough vaccines, hopefully, for everybody. I don't know if we won't be able to get them that fast, but they'll have enough for everybody by May 1st.
I know. That's pretty amazing. I mean, we talk about it being a long year, but it's only been a year. I mean, it's just amazing what we can do scientifically nowadays. It's just, it blows your mind.
So I'm hopeful that come November, when we do this again, it would be nice to be in a place together, watching it together. So,
yes. All right. Okay. So we're going to actually talk about like writing and books and stuff. So tell us about your newest release. That's A Road to Ruin, right?
Yes. That came out a couple of weeks ago. And well, I don't know when this is airing like it's a TV show.
I don't either yet. So like I said, first time, we're going to see when it's airing. So it might be a while, but hopefully only a few weeks.
So A Road to Ruin came out at the end of February, and it's the third book it's a trilogy, but it's really like the 19th book in a world of the same book. So like I have this series called The Untouchables, and there's 12 of those books, and then there's a follow-on trilogy for that called The Spitfire Society. That's the same world, the same characters. I mean, literally the brother of the heroine in the 12th book is the hero of like the third book in that trilogy. And so people were like, I want to read about this brother story. Well, great, read this next series. And then The Pretenders, which was the trilogy that came after that, is also the same Untouchables world. It's just a little bit different, I guess, overarching theme and whatnot for the trilogy. And I wrote both of those. They're standalone books, but they're sort of like an overarching, like I said, theme or connection.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was writing a note to myself to ask you for, any new or aspiring authors out there, making them be standalones or having sub-series, it seems makes your readers have entry points that they don't have to look at a series and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a JD Robb series with 50 books. Where do I begin? So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think the way my readers describe it is, and I don't think every series is this way, but like for The Pretenders, especially because it's 3 siblings, is there's definitely like beats. And so you'll probably get the most enjoyment out of it if you read all 3 of them in order, but it's still fun if you don't. Mm-hmm. I can use an example of something people are familiar with. Bridgerton is an 8-book series, and the show, of course, is structured a little bit, differently than the books. But in the show, there's a big reveal that happens in the first season of the show that doesn't happen in the books until book 4. Well, I started reading that series with book 4. I didn't know any better. I just picked up a book at a bookstore and I was like, oh, this looks good. And so I read it, and then I was like, oh, I like this. And it was the latest release. So I went back and read the previous 3 books. And even though that thing had already been spoiled for me, that had been built up over the books, whatever, 1 through 3, it didn't ruin my reading pleasure.
Right.
And so I guess that's a good example of something that's, if you read a series in order, it can be great, but you don't really have to.
And sometimes because I always like to know everything, sometimes I like reading ahead and knowing what's happening and then going back because you kind of see what's going to happen. You see the pieces sort of fall into place and you're like,
Right.
oh, I'm in on it. It's fun.
And it's interesting. And I think, some people are irritated with the TV show for revealing what they did when they did. But as someone who, spends a lot of time looking at story structure, and when you think about things that you want to keep from the reader or that you want the reader to be in on, but that the rest of your characters aren't in on, those are, choices we have to think about as writers, right? And so I think in the medium of television, it was actually a good thing that they did that, because it's something that the viewer is in on. And so it's almost like what you said, when, they now have the pleasure of, for however long before other characters find out,
Right.
of being in on the secret.
Right.
And that's cool.
Yeah. It adds to the tension in that respect, because you're
it's
like, oh, but yeah.
It's
And
the
it works
ticking
really
time bomb, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I was going to talk about story structure later, but you mentioned it.
Sorry.
But actually, no, that's fine. I'm wondering if I want to ask you about it now, but I don't, because I happen to also know that your next release is Improper, right?
Oh,
After.
yes.
Yeah, and I
So
know
have
that
a
you're
new
excited
series.
about it, and I
Yay.
get to read it soon, so I'm excited about it.
You do. I'm sorry I didn't get you.
So tell us about that one too.
So I have a new series, and this is probably, good information for aspiring writers to know. When I come up with an idea, I tend to come up with series ideas, just for the reason we said. I like to be able to create a world. Creating characters is probably one of my strengths, and so I like to create a world where people can, really get to know a cast of characters. And so this new series is called The Phoenix Club, and it's about a gentleman. He's the second son of a duke, and so he's sort of like he's what we call the spare, right? He's like Prince Harry, right? He's sort of like, we need you, but we don't really need you. And so he works with, and he likes to pal around with people that are other guys that are also maybe like the second son, or maybe their reputations aren't the best. They've made some poor choices, whatever. He wants to give people a second chance, and also people that aren't necessarily like, in society, people that are less fortunate. He wants to try to give them a chance. He helps them get, a better employment, or, maybe helps them get an education or whatever. And so the Phoenix Club is all about, rising from the ashes and giving people a second chance. And so all the stories are either the hero or the heroine is somebody in need of a second chance. And so that's sort of the overall theme. And then all the books start with the letter I. So the first book is called Improper, because it features a hero who has gotten himself into trouble with scandalous behavior, because he was going to get married 2 years before. He was pretty sure this gal was going to say yes, but someone else beat him to it with a better title. And so he had his heart broken, or so he thinks. And so he decides, fine, I'm just going to, do what I want for a while. And his dad was angry with him, so he wants to piss off his dad, all that good stuff. So he's in need of a second chance, because he's got to find a wife now, because his dad has died and set up a requirement in his will that if he has to marry by a certain date, or he's going to lose this house where he basically grew up with his mom, because his parents were estranged. So that's like, his mom is gone now, and so that's his one connection to her is this house, and he doesn't want to lose it, so he has to get married. And so in walks, by the way, Dad had a ward, and now she's your responsibility. And so wouldn't it be very improper if the guardian and the ward somehow fell in love?
I love it. I can't wait to read it. I know I get to read it soon, and I'm very excited.
Very soon. Yes. I just finished a couple weeks ago, but I have some edits I want to do, and then I will be getting it to you in just a couple of days.
Yay!
And then I'm super excited. The book after that is called Impassioned, and it's a couple that's already married, and had married because it was arranged, and that's just what you do. But they've been living apart, and let's just say there's a lot of sexual frustration. A lot of the hero is very uptight and needs to, as his brother puts it, get the stick out of his ass. And And his wife is, very much had enough of this living apart. And yeah, so I'm super excited to write that.
I love it. I love reading your books. I love reading historicals. So how did you, because you've written contemporaries too, tell everyone sort of your path to mostly doing historicals now. I mean, essentially doing historicals now. I don't think you have any contemporaries that you're coming up
I
with in the
don't.
future, right? Yeah. So
No.
how did you get into, what was your path to landing on historicals after doing, it's Ribbon Ridge, right? I always want to say
Yeah.
River Ridge, but it's Ribbon. Yeah. Which
So
are awesome, by the way, guys. So
the-
check them out.
thank you. The contemporaries are kind of a weird anomaly because I didn't really read contemporary romance. I have since then. I love your books, of course. um,
She
but
had to say that.
I know, yeah, no, I really do. I've read books that you people haven't yet been able to read. Anyway, so I was always a historical reader, and my degree's in history. I love history. I love history. And so that's always what I wanted to write. That's what I have all my ideas are pretty much that. I was at a writing retreat with some of the ladies. There was Romance Writers of America used to have this unpublished contest called the Golden Heart. And every year, the people that final in the Golden Heart kind of put together their own little group. It's like a networking kind of group. And so we had one in 2008 called the Pixie Chicks. It's because we used to sprinkle pixie dust when we would send stuff out to agents and editors. And anyway, so I live in Oregon. And so in the Northwest, we had a Northwest Pixies group that got together in person starting in 2009. And so we had retreats every year until this pandemic. And I forget what year it was, 2012, maybe. I don't know. We were up in Washington, the Olympic Peninsula, and this there was a main house, and then there was a guest house. And I was in the guest house with Rachel Grant and Courtney Milan. And it was fine. And then we smelled gas in the main house. We thought there was a gas leak. And so we had to call the gas company, and he came out and he turned off the gas and determined there was no leak and it was fine. And so he left. Well, but the gas was turned off to the guest house, and that was the heating. And so we had no heat, and it was January. And I honestly, I mean, I've camped on Mount Hood. I have never been so cold in my entire life.
Oh my
And
God.
I was sharing a room with Rachel. She was in like the bed, the master bedroom. I was like in like a little day bed over here with my sleeping bag. I don't know why I brought a sleeping bag. I had a sleeping bag, thank goodness. But I could not sleep because I was so cold. And all of a sudden I had this idea about this family of sextuplets that were like they had like a reality show when they were kids. And there was a seventh kid. He was like the oops kid because they'd worked so hard to have these kids in vitro or whatever. And they ended up with 6 of them. And then they had the seventh kid after the fact. They hadn't planned on. So he was sort of the odd man out or whatever. Anyway, it came to me like fully formed. And it was this small town in Oregon and all this stuff. And it just was there. And so I like barfed it out to everybody that weekend. And they were like, oh my God, you have to write that. And so I wrote like a prequel novella that I'd planned to be like sort of, my intro, like a giveaway or whatever, try this new series. And then I wrote the first book, and my agent shopped it, and then he sold it to Avon. So yay. And so but I wrote like 10 contemporary books, and I loved it, but I'll just be honest, they just didn't catch on as well as my historicals. And so that's where my passion has always been, my first
Right.
And I feel bad saying that because I love Ribbon Ridge and I have other ideas in Ribbon Ridge that I'd love to write, and maybe I will write them someday. I hope I will.
But it's cool. It's cool that you can do both. I cannot write historicals. I actually tried. And I do not have a head for historical facts. I would
like to read the attempt. I have not been able to.
Oh my God. I will see. If I know I haven't thrown it out, I ran across it recently. So for those of you who have not heard the story, if you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard the story. But so I was a lawyer, and my friend who turned me on to contemporary romance was the one who gave me the Julie Garwood. And I read it and I'm like, I love this so much. I loved it so much. And so I decided that I wanted to write a medieval romance too. I was commuting 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on traffic, each way to my job in Orange County from the house we had way out in San Bernardino County. And they were building a toll road at the time. So it was just a terrible commute. And so I was getting books on tape from the Newport Beach Public Library,
On
literal
tape.
cassette tapes, literal cassette tapes. That's how old I am. Thank you very much. So I had, thank you, Banana Cat Butt. Great.
I told you that was going to happen.
Totally. I love it. So I listened to Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, which is far and away one of my absolute favorite books
love that book
ever. It's so good. I listened to it in a week. That's how long my commute was. I finished it in a week. That is insane because that book is like this long.
Because that's a very long book.
Yeah. So, and it's something like the 1200s, like 1209 or something like that. So I decided that's my historical research. I will set my book in that particular period because I'm working as a lawyer on, this is before Google. I mean, we barely had intranet in the office at this point. You know, there is no Google, there is a library. I have no time to go there. So I'm doing that. And, you know, basically Ken Follett is my research. And I had this, I love the story. It's like sort of like a Robin Hood where the heroine's father had taken over the castle and made the hero who was, you know, the laird of the castle go live in the forest with his band of merry men, you know, and he's going to take it back and kidnap the girl and yada, yada, yada. And oh my God, I got to a point in the book. I mean, the point of view was crazy. I had a point of view of the bird flying over the forest at one point. I mean, it was like really, really. And I remember there was one time where he's on a horse and he's going into town for some reason, and he pulls his sword and he's talking to a kid that he wants to have go run an errand for him to do something. And I just sat there and I went, I don't know what the horse is. I mean, is it called a steed? Is it called a destrier? I don't know what it's called. I have no idea. It's a big horse. He's on it. I'm not going to just call it horsey, right? And I'm like, I don't know what his sword was made out of. I don't even know if they had money, you know, or would he pay this kid in money? Would he pay him in like grain? I don't know, because I don't have time to go to the Newport Beach Public Library to find out, you know. I had no idea. And so I got about 90 pages in with probably 90 points of view. And I gave up. I was like, and that's when I went to my friend Barbara and I'm like, she's like, so how's the writing going? And I'm like, I can't write a historical. I love them so much. I'm enjoying reading them. Julie Garwood I met her at RWA one year and I just practically fawned all over the poor woman. And I'm like, I love these so much. I can't write them. I would have to read like 900 of them and they would be my research. And she's like, you do know that there's contemporary romance writing. So thank you, Barbara Miller, for changing my life.
Seriously. When I think about what those authors had to do pre-internet research-wise, it boggles my mind. I remember though, for the second book of the Untouchables, The Duke of Daring, I was writing, the hero is a daredevil and he likes to do like increasingly dangerous stuff. And so he wants to ride in a hot air balloon. And so I was doing all this research on hot air balloons and whatnot, because I just wanted to know what he would have to be, you know, could he be in a balloon with someone else? Was it big enough for two people? But, you know, I need all that kind of stuff. And so I'd done a bunch of research online, but there was a book I really wanted to read and I found it at the library downtown. And so I remember, and the library was going to close in like an hour. So I jumped in my car. For some reason, I was really desperate to read this book. And I went down there and I don't know why I didn't check it out. I don't know. Must have been a reason. I don't know. But I went there and I was reading it in the library and taking notes until they closed. And then, yeah.
Nowadays, though, I mean, in the 20%. But see, your research is probably pretty tame. My research, I remember one time, it was for my Dirtiest trilogy, which involved kidnapping, right? And so I called like the FBI and, you know, their kidnap section, and I'm like, so I need to know if there's a kidnapping, are you required to like let the public know, like the press know? And they're like, well, we don't have to say it out loud, but, you know, if someone asks, we tell them. But it was this long involved thing. And I'm like sitting here going, you know, I researched it online. I couldn't find the answer. And then I'm calling the FBI, like, so basically saying, what's going to happen if I kidnap somebody, you know? And you're sitting there going, what kind of lists am I on? Because I've done all of these weird things with, you know, all these books that have like human trafficking and drugs and weird sex. It's like, yeah, just don't look at my history never go into my internet history. It's a scary place.
I wish I was a better internet researcher though. I'm trying to research something right now for a series that I'm developing in the future. And I'm trying to read about printing presses and printing in general in the early 19th century, and like seriously, Dexter, no. Okay, we have a neighbor cat that comes in. He's a very big lunk of a cat. He has wedged himself between the printer and something else on my desk. Oh, I thought he was stuck. I legitimately thought he was stuck there. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, you can leave that in. That's fine.
I intend
to. Good. He's knocking everything off the desk now, but whatever. So anyway, I'm trying to like, there's just not, in this case, I think I want a couple of books to read. It's not enough for me to just go and read some articles and whatever. And so I'm looking for books now that I can like order. And I used to love pre-pandemic. We have Powell's here in Portland, which is the largest independent bookstore west of Mississippi. And they call it Powell's City of Books because it literally, I mean, it's a city block and it's so fun. Did you go?
You took me there. You took me there and it was amazing. And we did not stay nearly long enough because that would have been like an entire day. You know, and I also, if I remember right, I didn't have any way to get, I would have had to have shipped books home because my suitcase was like this packed.
Yes, you brought a tiny suitcase.
I brought a tiny suitcase, yeah.
Well, and their romance section is pathetically small. So that's,
but their research type stuff, their nonfiction stuff is like so
cool. I have so many books from there.
So I can tell you the best place, you need to come here because have you ever heard of Archer City?
No.
So Larry McMurtry, and I think it still exists. I don't know if all the bookstores do, but Larry McMurtry back in the day, I don't know if he owned the town or if he just sort of started this. It's a bookstore town. There are like all of these old, antique, rare and used bookstores that fill this city. When I was writing for Harlequin, I wrote a book about a serial killer who was leaving Victorian erotica around as clues, you know, basically as hints that he was going to kill somebody. That's how I researched it. We went there and I found all of this old original Victorian erotica. I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff. Do you need to go get Dexter? You look concerned.
There's a stack of papers next to my desk and he stepped on it and it literally went like this. And I thought the whole thing was going to go toppling off. So, but it did not. He checked himself. Sorry. So funny. Where is Archer City? Why have you never mentioned this to me before?
It's a way long.
For 4 years.
We should have actually. It's about probably a 3-hour drive from, I mean, I'd have to look at the map because I honestly don't remember, but I know that when we went and saw my grandmother and my father in the DFW area first, because it's in way North Texas. So, so it would have been a long schlep, but if you're into books and if it is still like it was, this was probably at least, it's gotta be at least 20 years ago since I was there because we didn't have kids then and my daughter's 19. So
can we work it into our road trip? That we take?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because if we're meeting in the middle there, yeah, absolutely.
No. That or when I fly to you and then we take our road trip to Florida.
If you fly, because if you fly instead of flying to me, so you guys don't care about this, but learn a little bit about Texas geography. If you fly to DFW instead of to Austin, then we would be close. We could do that. And then we can take the route I've never taken to Florida, which goes up through I-20 instead of I-10. We could do that.
Oh, okay.
We could possibly even stop somewhere in Arkansas and see my cousins who I haven't seen in forever.
Sure, why not?
They'd feed us. And that's always important.
That's great.
Yay, a plan. Yay. You guys heard it here first. We'll post it on the internet.
We'll let you know. We'll do Tales from the Road.
That's right. We should actually. That would be fun. All right. Okay. So getting back to some real stuff. So what do you think is your biggest challenge as an author? You said earlier that you think your biggest strength is characters, and I tend to agree that you are awesome at characters. What do you think is your biggest challenge, either on the business side or the writing side? I don't, whatever.
The word "so" apparently I use.
Oh my God, me too. That's what that surprises you.
I know. When I was reading your book last week, you're like, I have something about the word "so," and I'm like, oh, me too. I have to cut it out when I'm writing. It's hard. It's bad.
Yeah, it's in my bad word file. It's not. There's no actual bad words there. There are words like "so" and apparently Dicey has been added to that list. So Darcy's reading my book and she's like counting them, and we get to the end and she's like, that's Dicey number 7 or something. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I'm flipping you off, my friend.
I thought it was funny. Anyway,
it was funny. It was hysterical.
A little dicey, whatever.
It was a little dicey.
A little dicey. My biggest
other than the word "so,"
my biggest challenge as a writer, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of challenges as a writer. It's hard. We are now 100% indie publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, being an entrepreneur and wearing a hat that has nothing to do with being creative and writing. It's
Yes.
very hard to go back and forth for me. I think, it's challenging for me sometimes there's just so much in my brain that I want to get out. And it's hard sometimes to get it all out. And so because I'm like an information hoover, right? I just want to suck
Mm-hmm.
it all up and then I have to get it out somehow, right? Because there's a finite amount of space in my brain, probably, I think. That doesn't feel as spongy as it used to. Damn it.
Yeah.
So I would say something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
Fair enough. I get that. I'm right there with you on the whole entrepreneur thing. I just want to write my books and have people magically take them and read them. This whole putting them out there in the marketplace. It's like, no, come to me.
Right.
Just, yeah.
Yeah. And finding ways to,
yeah.
It's hard to find. Well, it feels like it's hard to find new readers.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
Read Darcy. If you guys have not read Darcy and you're watching this, you have to, because you will thank me later. I promise you.
And I have a lot of books. I've written almost 50 books. I know that's
you are
not even half as many as you've written, but
Well, I've been writing longer than you have. I think you're going to overtake me, and then I'm going to go.
I don't think so.
Still very. We'll have to duke it out because I'm competitive.
No. So yeah, sometimes it's challenging because I have too many ideas. Like, I'm trying to have a little bit of a calmer pace this year, so I'm not quite so frenetic, but I already have like other books I want to try to.
That never happens to me.
No, I know. This is completely.
I cannot empathize with you at all on that topic.
I know. Try.
But it's hard, right? Because that's the whole point. That's why we're writers, is we have these ideas, and then
right.
And then it's like you want some sort of magical machine to take you put a little hat on, and your book is there, and then all you have to do is edit it, and then then you could get all your ideas out.
And don't you think about like James Patterson now and how he does that? Basically, doesn't he like come up with an idea and then he has like,
he does, and I find that I find that fascinating because I develop my ideas as I'm writing them.
I know.
It's like I listened to him talk at RWA one year. I don't know if you remember yet or not. I can't remember which RWA it was. It was early. And he came and he talked. It was fascinating because he talked about how he would have this room with tables on it, and he would lay out a plot for a book on each table. And I'm like, that's great. I do write synopses, not as detailed as I did when I was traditionally published, but I do write them. But they change as I get to know the characters through writing them. Yeah. So I just don't think I could do that. I mean, I suppose if I trained myself to do it, I could, but that's not the pleasure for me. The pleasure isn't figuring out the plot. The pleasure for me is pulling all the depth of the characters into it.
The discovery, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because to me, writing a book is very much like reading a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes.
I love when I get to the point of the book where it's like you're turning pages faster and faster, and you want to, you can't read fast enough. I get to a point of writing where I'm that way too, mm-hmm. right? I can't write fast enough, and I just want to, and that's, but I guess with him, it's a co-writing situation, right? So he's found a place maybe where he can put the idea out, somebody else can write it, and then he can massage it into his thing. I don't know, for me, if I would want to like change the voice a little bit. You know what I mean? I'd want to, I would Darcyize it or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how that would work.
Well, I mean, he's doing it with himself and another author, so it wouldn't be quite as important for it to be your voice, because it's not just
it's more of a co-writer
book. It's literally a co-write, but yeah, I just think it would skip the part that gives me the most pleasure. I mean, I love coming up with the idea, the concept, the high concept of the book, but that's not a book. That's just an idea. That's worth nothing. You have to develop it. And then you figure out the plot, but I never really do. I mean, if I went back and looked at all the synopses that I've written, and I've written a lot because I wrote them for every traditional book I published, and I published probably 80 traditional books before I went indie. Most of my synopses, except for maybe the Harlequin Temptations, are like 20 pages long, single spaced. I mean, they're detailed synopses. but I would never look at them again. And it's interesting because if you went back and compared it to the book, for the first half, it probably tracks. And then it doesn't. The
Right.
resolution is never what I thought it was going to be. The next two books, when they're outlined, are never what the next two books are going to be, which is also a lesson for any authors out there who are trying to break into traditional publishing. You are not trapped by what you put in the synopsis that you sell. You write the best book as it needs to be, and then the series will go where it needs to be. And if you say that in book 2 in your series, Fred and Maribeth are going to get together and go raise elephants, they don't have to. Maybe they're not even remotely interested in elephants, and that's the way you go. But that's just,
I really thought you were going to say Fred and Ginger.
So what was your biggest, either your most rewarding thing that's happened to you as an author, or what you feel is your biggest misstep as an author? I'll let you pick. Or do both. I don't care.
I don't want to talk about missteps. Actually, I will talk about a misstep, and then I will talk about something fun, because I think it's a good thing for aspiring writers to hear. After I wrote my first series, it was 6 books. And it was called Secrets and Scandals. To Seduce a Scandal, that you mentioned, is the 3rd book in that series. And I love that book. I know we're not supposed to have favorite books, but that remains one of my favorite books. The opening of that book, it's the first 50 pages is like the movie Date Night with Steve Carell and Tina Fey, where it's just like one night and just this one bad thing after another keeps happening to these people. and I loved it. It was so fun to write. It wrote really fast and it was great. Best, I think, still to this day, probably the best opening I think I've ever written for a book. So, but those books all had, like that book and the one before it, were like Regency Fight Club. And then I introduced into Seduce a Scoundrel the villain in that book. I redeemed him over time, and he was the hero of the last book in that series. But they're on the run from, like, the Regency bad guys, whatever. And so, but I was really into like kind of action adventure, and I really loved the idea of like a Regency era, like Indiana Jones or Romancing the Stone or something. And so I wanted to write this series that was like that. And so I'd planned to write like a prequel book that was like the parents, and then I was going to write the kids, 3 books, and I called it Regency Treasure Hunters. And I ordered these books. So speaking about library books, they were these original books from like the Regency era of like these archaeological digs in Wiltshire, because I wanted to be archaeology, or whatever. So I got, and they were these massive, like giant books that I had to get on order from some university somewhere, I don't know. And so, and I had them for a couple of months, and it was fine, and they were fascinating, and I didn't use any of it.
Of course.
So that's misstep number 1. No. But so I wrote the first book in that series, and because my first series had done pretty well, and so I wrote this first book, and it was called the De Ballery Code, because I took it from the Da Vinci Code, because they had this medieval manuscript that they had to decode basically to find the treasure. And it was super fun to write. It was, it didn't take place in London, it took place in Wales. And it because there ended up being Arthurian legend. That's what I ended up going with as far as what the treasures they were looking for and whatnot. And it was really fun to write that, because who doesn't love, King Arthur and all that. And so I wrote that book, and it did okay. It didn't like blow me out of the water or whatever. But then I wrote the next book, which was called Romancing the Earl, and published that. Like, one book came out at the end of summer, and I published it in the spring. It's like 6 months later, probably. And it tanked. Like, I don't even think I made what I spent on it, like editing and cover and all that stuff. Because I had paid like an exorbitant amount of money for this custom image, where I, was like, I want this sort of Indiana Jones looking image. She sent me an image that was pretty close, but it ended up not being, it didn't translate great for what I wanted. So anyway, it was terrible. And so I went back and wrote something else entirely. I just gave up on the series. I'd written half of it, and I'm like, well, this is just whatever. And it kills me to not have something undone, right? Because I had 2 other books planned. And so then I wrote The Untouchables, and The Untouchables took off and it was really successful. And so, but I still had, this loyal core of readers that had read it and like really wanted me to finish it. So I thought, well, these other books are doing well enough and, paying the bills or whatever. So maybe I can take the time and finish this series because I'd really like to. And so I wrote the 3rd book, Lord of Fortune, and I changed the covers and I changed the title. So the Valerie Code is now called Lady of Desire. It has a more romance name, and I gave it a little bit more of a romance cover and whatever. And then those books did better. They're still not my best-selling series, but they're kind of my favorite series
They're
because
so much fun. They
I
should be
love,
like a TV show, honestly. They are so much
I
fun.
am hoping it will be a TV show
It would
someday or a
be
movie or something,
amazing.
because
Yes.
because I adapted it from screen,
Mhm.
right? And I don't necessarily, people ask, when you write a book, do you see, like, some people cast people in their heads? I don't do
Yeah,
that,
I
and
don't
I've
either.
never done that, and I didn't do it with these books. But I could see scenes cinematically, and I
Mhm.
haven't ever done that with any other books that I've written.
Now, okay, is that true? Did you do it with the Die Hard book?
Did I do what?
See scenes cinematically with the Die
Yes.
Hard book. So Darcy and I both wrote about the same time. We wrote a Christmas book that was based on Die Hard,
Mhm.
specifically and on purpose, right? So hers is historical, obviously. Mine is not. Mine is Cherish Me. It's a Nikki and Damien romance. I can't remember your title. What was your title?
Legend of a Rogue,
Yeah.
and it's
And
set around Culloden.
and
Battle of
I
Culloden.
literally saw the Die Hard scenes in my
Yeah.
head when Damien was
Oh,
doing
yeah,
Die
and
Hard
mine
type stuff.
has
Yeah.
very distinct homage, I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't have his shoes. He's
I forgot this. I didn't do the shoe thing. I
he
should have
doesn't
done
have
that.
his shoes, and
Yeah.
he doesn't have a gun, but he has a sword taped to his back, or not taped to his back, but tied to his back.
Yeah.
There's no tape. I mean, I did my
fun.
best in the 18th century.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I definitely saw like scenes doing that. So
Yeah.
that was my biggest messed up, and probably what most rewarding is when I wrote The Untouchables. I don't know what I did. The first book in that series just like took off, first at Barnes and Noble and then at
It's
Amazon.
awesome.
I don't know what I mean, it has a great cover, but I didn't do anything super special for it. I just put it out in the world. And this was 5 years ago. 5 years ago this week.
Wow.
And then by the time I got to book 9 in that series, every book had just done better and better and better. And then when book 9 released, it hit USA Today.
Yay.
That was fun.
So cool. I love that. And there's such good books. You guys, you have to read them if you haven't. Gosh, we've already gone over an hour, so I will wrap this up quickly. What's your best advice for aspiring writers?
My best advice for aspiring writers, I would say to really hone your craft. I mean, it's really easy now there are a lot of paths to publication. There were not a lot of paths to publication when I started out, or when Julie started out. And now you have choices, which isn't to say you shouldn't, go the independent publishing route, not at all. I was actually working with a local writer here recently. We've had a little Zoom meeting. She was a counselor at my daughter's Girl Scout camp. And so she reached out to me recently and she's like, hey, I've written this book and, this romance. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind giving me some pointers or whatever. And so we met via Zoom and I talked about, and she really wants to like try to be traditionally published. And so we talked about that a little bit. And then I read her pages for her, and she just has a really great attitude and has a really good story start. And I gave her some suggestions on craft books to read. She'd already read one of them, so I thought that was awesome. And so, which is great because she's taking the time to really study story structure and character, and just to really write a good story before she puts down the world. And I think
that's so important.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And for anybody out there who is looking to publish your first book, just keep in mind that you can only make a first impression once. You have one chance to make a first impression. If you blow that chance, you can start over again with a new name or whatever, but who wants to do that? You
don't, because then you have
your craft. Yeah. Hire editors, have everybody and their dog read the book and make sure it's the book that you want it to be, and it's as good as you can make it. And
and then when you're done with that, do it again. Because I think the hardest thing as a writer is finishing the first book.
Yes.
And then you can do it, but then you got to do it again. And so I remember the first book that I finished took me about 13 months to get to the end. I mean, I had very small children at the time. So, and then the next book I wrote took me like 6 or 8 months, maybe. And then the next book I wrote in like 3 months. And that
I
was the
wish
first
I could
book.
remember. I wish I were a journaler and could go back and look and see all of that stuff. But
And then
because
I
I have
wrote,
no recollection.
and then I wrote Improper, the last book that I wrote, in 31 days.
Yeah. Yes, I would like to not be as fast a writer as I have become. That would make me happy.
But 31 days was comfortable. I mean,
31 days is not, yeah.
and when I say
That's
31 days, that's 31 writing days. You know,
right.
there were days I didn't write in there, but it was 31 writing days. And yeah.
No, that is comfortable. And then, that's not, here's this, and on day 31, you press publish on KDP. That's not
Correct.
what
Yes. No,
Darcy is
that was my
saying.
first draft. Yes. I
Yeah.
sent it off to my editor, and now I'm going to edit it, and then I'm going to send it off to my friendly beta reader who's sitting right over there.
I can't wait. I'm so excited about this book. I really am. It's so much fun.
It was a relief. You know, when you start a new series, you're always a little bit like, do these characters work? Does the world work? You know, am I in the right? You know what I mean? The first book is just, and I'm surprised this first book wrote as fast as it did, but I did a lot of prep work up in advance. And one thing you'll learn, you know, if you're an aspiring writer, one thing you'll figure out is what processes work for you, and just how, when you're most creative, and how you can work best. And that comes, unfortunately, with time.
Yes, it does. It does. Okay, so one other piece of advice, and then I'm going to take you through my 3 speed dating questions that I'm going to ask every guest.
Okay.
They're not hard.
I know. I mean, they can't be hard. They're speed dating, so they can't be hard. I don't know.
So one other thing that aspiring authors, or just or newbie authors, maybe they've already published a few books, but they're still new to the business, that you think that is a good takeaway for anybody who's aspiring or new.
You know, and I think what I want to say is true for anybody, even if you're not new anymore, is surround yourself with people who get you and who will tell you the truth. And whether they're critiquing your manuscript, whether they're looking at your cover, whether they're reading your blurb, whether they're listening to a pitch of your idea, writing can be very solitary. And so you want coworkers, right? I mean, you know, when you work in an office or whatever, you know, hang out in the lunchroom or water, whatever, and you shoot the shit and you talk about, you know, what was on The Bachelor. I don't watch The Bachelor, but whatever. You talk about the Meghan and Harry interview, which I also didn't watch, but whatever. Back in the day, I used to watch Survivor before I had kids and was working. So we used to talk about Survivor. Now I'm dating myself. That show is still on, I think. But anyway, but you want to have people, coworkers that you talk to. Like I have Julie and a bunch of other people that we talk to on a regular basis. And like we just got together the other night to talk about like advertising and our best practices. And so just, you know, find yourself a posse of professional people who this is their job. Because if you want this to be your job, you need to treat it like a job. I had this conversation with my daughter recently because she's an art major and she loves art, and she's having to produce a lot of art for her portfolio and stuff. And she's like, it's so much. And I said, you know, there's a time where your hobby and your fun passion thing becomes your job, which is great. If in life you get to have a job that you love that much and that you're super passionate about, then you're lucky and that's awesome. But yes, there is a transition when that comes from a hobby to a job.
Yeah.
And that will happen to every writer. Because I guarantee, you know, if you're becoming a writer just because you think it's a quick buck, or you're gonna, you know, it's just something you should try because you hear people can make money or whatever, I would say that's not the right reason to do it. Because if you're not really passionate about the writing, you'll grow to resent it.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Excellent advice. All right. My speed dating questions. These are the ones I'm going to ask everybody unless I change my mind later. So there you go. That's my caveat. All right.
Maybe I'll ruin
favorite movie or TV show?
I hate these questions.
I know. That's why I do them, because I hate them too. I get to ask them.
It is hard for me to have a favorite anything because I like
me too.
And so I will say that one of my very favorite movies of all time that I can watch over and over and over again, and I will never get tired of it, and it's not even the best movie, is Notting Hill.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
That
Julia
press
Roberts
conference scene at the end.
oh,
I
and
will
that's
watch
not even my favorite part.
I will watch just that if I'm in the
And
mood to watch
the
just
famous
that.
line, you know, I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking him to love her. We saw a version of that on Supernatural last night where they were at this LARPing thing, you know, live action role play. And she's like, anyway, it was hilarious. So anyway, and that line, it always makes me cringe. I just think it's a weirdly written line. I think the way she delivers it is weird. And so it's so weird that movie is like one of my very favorite movies, because she actually drives me nuts through half of it. But
I do not love her. I do not love her in that movie either, but I love that movie. It's like, I'm like, I would think I would love it so much more if it was someone other than her, but yeah. I still love it's David Mamet too. I mean, he's, you know, he wrote the script, so it's just,
and that's how I feel about 4 Weddings and a Funeral. It's a great movie, but I can't stand Andy McDowell in that movie.
This is why we're friends. We already knew this, but this is it.
But I love the scene in Notting Hill where they're all around the table and he's with his sister and his friends, and they're all talking about the brownie.
Yes.
I love brilliant. That. So
and oh my God, the guy, the friend, it took me forever to realize he's Downton dude.
Yes, yes.
I did not know that he's until like,
so what kind of acting do you do? She's like, films mainly.
It's hard to make a living doing that. How much did you
make in this movie? $15 million. Well done.
Well done, you.
We've seen this movie a lot. But you know, I don't know what I've written how many books, and I've never written a compete for the brownie kind of scene. I'm gonna write a compete.
I need to compete for the brownie sign. We'll have to time that one.
Compete for the biscuit, because it's historical. Or the cake. Ooh, I'm writing.
There you go.
Remind me, because I'll forget, and we'll remind each other. Yes, you need to write it too.
Okay, I will remind you. I do. We need to write it at the same time.
My favorite TV shows change all the time, but I really, really love Lucifer. It's a great show, and I know you need to watch it so that we can.
I've started watching it, and I really like it. It's just really hard to. It's really hard to watch a TV show. Oh, my internet is unstable now. In my house, because I'm watching different things with different people, you know, like different people in my family want to watch them. And that's one that nobody else is interested in except me. So I can only watch it when I'm not writing or not writing something else. But I do like it. I'm enjoying it. I will say, and I thought you were going to say Fleabag, honestly.
I was just going to say, your choice. I will say what I think is the most perfectly written series of television in the history of television is season 2 of Fleabag. And that's a hill I will die on. So.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It really is.
It's really brilliant.
I have to say, I still am a huge fan of Mad Men and I'm watching Breaking Bad right now. It is a really amazing show. And interestingly too, so Breaking Bad is fascinating too, because I just learned, if you've not watched Breaking Bad, spoiler alert, but there's a character who's in season 1 who was supposed to die in season 1. Oh. And one of the main characters, and he ends up being a main character through the entire series. And I just think that applies to books too. You think you might know what's going to happen, right? But that's why, you know, going back to the whole James Patterson plotting out the book thing, it's so important from my perspective to let the characters do their thing and be their thing, because it's Jesse became such an important character, and he had such great chemistry with.
Was he supposed to die?
I can't think of the actor's name who plays Walt. He was supposed to die. Yes, he was not supposed to be past season 1. And he has a movie now, you know, he's got El Camino. So, and they decided that because his chemistry with Bryan Cranston, was so amazing, and he was so good in the role, that they kept him for he stayed a major character for the whole thing. But I just think things like that are just so fascinating.
Well, I think
just the whole development of story and how it shifts and changes.
That happened with the story you just wrote. Yeah. I mean, you had characters that you planned
to
do other things with, and didn't.
So. Yeah. I had bad guys who are no longer bad, and good guys who were no longer good, and it just changed all over the place.
Throwaway characters,
but it works.
That I now want stories for.
Yes. I know. I love Corbin. He was such an ass, and he's not as much of an ass anymore.
But he's just the right amount of ass. Ooh, that sounds weird.
He's still definitely an ass. Yes, he's
the right amount
kind of ass you love to hate. Yeah. So I like.
I think that needs to be his tagline. Just the right amount of
ass. Amount of ass. I don't have to write it down because it's on the video. I'll see it again. But I have to remember that. So that book, yes.
That's not a good speed answer.
Series.
Sorry.
Fallen Saint series. You have to read the whole series.
Yep.
My Cruel Salvation. She just read. You get to read it in May. So next question, your favorite book. It doesn't have to be a romance. It can be any genre you want.
I am super bad at favorite books because my favorite book tends to be the last book that I read, which would be My Cruel Salvation.
Thank you. I did that on purpose. Look at that. Her favorite book is My Cruel Salvation. Isn't that amazing? Clearly, y'all must read the entire trilogy.
But you were talking about.
What was your favorite book as a child? What was your favorite book as a child?
I don't know.
Can't do it. Yeah, mine was A Wrinkle in Time. I read that book about 9,000 times.
I read so many books. I wasn't a book rereader, and so you know what I mean.
I'm a total rereader. I reread and rewatch everything. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I know you do, and I don't generally do that. I mean, I have romance novels. I mean, I have a handful of romance novels that I've reread a bunch of times. There's some Amanda Quick, some Kathleen Woodiwiss, Judith McNaught, Almost Heaven is like one of my very favorite. Yeah, Judith McNaught, Almost Heaven is probably one of my very favorite romance novels.
All right, favorite drink.
Oh God.
I didn't know these were such stumpers. I really didn't.
I know. Well, it's because the pandemic has done a number on me. I can't drink like hard cider really anymore. It gives me heartburn. And I can't drink a lot of wine anymore. And I have like a whole wine closet. I mean, I love.
Oh my God, you do. She has a whole under the stairs wine cellar from Awesomeness. It's incredible.
Yeah. And yeah.
In Texas, I'd have vinegar.
What's that?
In Texas, I would have vinegar. I'd have a whole under the stairs thing of vinegar. I mean, it's like, I'm so jealous.
Right. Well, yeah. And we should have like a, temperature controlled something, but who has space? I don't have space for that right now. Someday maybe, but I do like, Pinot Noir quite a bit. And, I do, my husband makes a really mean lemon drop that I like.
Nice. All right. Well,
did we make that for you when you were here?
No. I have to come back, clearly.
Yeah, we do. He makes a really good one. They're knock you on your ass.
But we did bond over the bananas, so that's a thing.
I should have said banana liqueurs. Missed opportunity. Where's your banana trophy?
Yes. So I will. Do you want to tell the banana story or should I? And that can be our last story. See my banana story from the top banana. It's a great story. Do you want to tell it or should I?
You can tell it.
Okay, so Darcy and I went up to visit Darcy in Oregon and we drove to Seattle to go to a meeting at Amazon. So we're sitting there, we've gone all around Seattle and we go in, and Amazon's offices are really cool. They've got this escalator that just sort of goes up and then you check in and there's a little bench where you check in. So we go in, we check in, we're sitting on the little bench waiting for our person to come get us. And we look over to the escalator, and it's just sort of rising up like, like a escalator from hell in a horror movie or something. And these people are coming off. And every time we look over, somebody has a banana.
And it's like the start of the work days. There's lots of people coming.
Yeah, all these people. And we start noticing that like every third person has a banana. And it was the weirdest freaking thing.
And then some guy had 2 bananas.
Yes, it was like banana palooza. It was insane.
We were like, what is going on?
It was crazy pants. And so finally we asked, I mean, it was, we were dying at this point. I mean, we're like cracking up because it's like,
there's another one.
It was crazy. It's like, bananas. Turns out they have a banana stand at Amazon where they give away bananas to the staff to, I guess, keep their potassium levels up or something. But after that, we were seeing bananas everywhere. Everywhere we went, there were bananas. It was the craziest thing.
I am surprised. We actually went and got tattoos that night.
We should have gotten bananas.
We should have gotten bananas. I'm surprised we didn't.
I am too. Well, I had a plan, so you can't really see.
Did have a plan.
They're upside down. Okay, so I got the Eiffel Tower in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
I got the Space Needle in Seattle. And this, which everyone seems to think is a hypodermic needle, is actually the Empire State Building that I got in New York, which... Yeah. But yeah, my manager is like, I meet him for the first time and he's like, why do you have a hypodermic needle tattooed to your wrist? I'm like, it's the Empire State Building.
And you would think with the context of the other buildings,
yes,
you would think that people would understand that it's
but so now.
And then your Big Ben plan got ruined.
Yeah.
But you'll get there.
I'll get there. And you got your awesome tattoo on your ankle.
Oh yeah, do I have to show my foot?
You do not have to show your foot.
I have.
But you can.
I can. I have to like tip it. There we go.
It's so cool. Little bookshelf with the hearts coming out of the book. It's so awesome.
And I actually, so I took the open book with the hearts that the guy did, and I had to have it redone later because he didn't do the best job. He did a great job on Julie's tattoo, and then mine, like, half of it flaked off. Like literally half the book was gone. It was ridiculous.
I think it was hurting you so much. I think he might have been afraid to go.
I think so too, because I was flinching. But it's so funny because when I had it redone, I wasn't flinching that much, and I was I didn't have you to hold on to, so I don't know. So I don't know. Well, and the guy that I went to the second time he was super fast too, and just I don't know. He colored in the hearts, and I didn't even know he'd done it.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I want another one, but I don't know what it is. I mean, I have to get Big Ben, obviously, and I've still got room on my wrist. So
yeah,
someday.
Well, I have an appointment next month to augment the one I got on my back list. It's Julie's fault. I had one little tiny tattoo that was just my sorority letters, and then I went with Julie to get the books to make it into books.
Well, see, I would stand up and show my whole tattoo, but it's like
your books are cool.
My books are cool. So
they are cool.
That one I can show pretty easily.
That one you can
show. Can you see? Here. I don't know if you can. Can you really see that? I mean, there's like a tank top.
A little bit.
You really can't. Anyway, it's a nice. Yeah, it's a fun
cool.
tattoo. I've got little flying tattoos there. I mean, flying books there. It's fun.
I
don't get to see it. I don't get to see that one or the big one on the bottom of my back because they're behind me. But
yeah, I can't see the one that I got last summer. I did it for my big birthday, and because my birthday's on St. Patrick's Day next week, and so I got my shamrock.
That's right. And my husband's birthday is this month as well. Birthday month.
Oh, that's right, because your birthday is by my husband's birthday, and my birthday is by your husband's birthday. What we do.
That makes sense. Makes perfect sense. All right. Thank you for doing this. I hope you guys enjoyed the chat. Darcy writes amazing, awesome books. And
so does Julie.
Thank you. And so check out her books and follow my weekly blogs on writing, and check the little box in YouTube to follow this series, because I'm going to start interviewing other authors. So it'll be fun. So
none of them will be as good as this one then.
No.
Well, they'll probably all be better because I'm just my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Farewell. Goodbye.
Bye.